Well, hello folks, and welcome back. Today we're going to begin the reassembly of the front hub, wheel hub. Here's the hub itself. You can see it's been cleaned and polished. It's a little smudgy right now from me handling it, but I've got it polished up, got it cleaned up. Recall I did have to leave this seal in here. I explained that before, why I had to do that. The contact drum for the brake shoes, nice and clean. This is the backing plate for the brake shoes themselves. Again, it's a little smudged up right now, but got it polished up as much as I'm going to get it. This is where the brake shoes themselves will fit. That'll probably be the subject of another video, that is installing the brake shoes. I'm not sure yet. We'll see how long this one goes. It's where the drive mechanism for the speedometer fits in. Here are all the parts, or most of the parts, that go into this hub arrangement. These are the originals that will be refit, including the seals. If you recall, I wasn't sure I could save the seals, but I can. They're in very good shape. I was quite surprised. So these are the original seals that came out of this hub, and I'll have to grease those up and put them back in. These parts over here are new parts that I got via Yamaha, with the exception of this seal. This I did not get directly from Yamaha. This is no longer serviced, this part. That's the part number. That's my tag, by the way, that I put on parts that come in without any clear identification. And this seal will go in here in the backing plate eventually. And the rest of these seals are part of the speedometer drive mechanism over in here. And I'll be talking about those in more detail later. The first thing I need to do here is install this inner spindle. That'll fit inside of here like that, and will be captured by the bearings, one on each side, like that, inside of this hub. Consequently, what I need to do is grease both of these sealed meaning you can see the seals on each side. It's curious, Yamaha used two different brands. They're the same size bearing. They are not the same brand. My suspicion, and that's all it is one of these has been replaced, perhaps somewhere along the life of the bike. So one of them might be original, one of them might not be. I don't really know, or maybe they're both been replaced. Couldn't tell you, but they're in good shape, so I'm going to go ahead and reuse those. So I'll go ahead and show you how I will grease these bearings up. I'll only show one of them because it'll be repetitious before I go ahead and install them in the hub. We're going to go ahead now and grease this sealed bearing. This just happens to be the one with the blue seal on it. If it's a two-sided bearing, or an open on two sides, which this one clearly isn't, the process would be the same. You'll see I put a little bit of fresh grease there on the palm of my hand. I use gloves for this only because it is so messy, that you'll see here in a minute. Any good quality grease, don't use inexpensive or cheap grease. I spend premium money and buy good greases. I've got 3 or 4 different types of grease. This just happens to be a standard, good quality, petroleum-based wheel bearing grease, high temperature wheel bearing grease. Any good quality grease that's rated for bearings will be fine. Real simple. Put a little grease on the palm of your hand. Take the open side up like you can see there. And what you're going to do is you're going to squeeze like that the grease into the open sections of the bearing. Now if this was open on two sides, it would come out the other side, which obviously it can't here, but it's as simple as that. Let's see what that looks like right there. And you just keep forcing it in. You might be surprised how much grease these bearings will take. I'm going to force all the grease in, and then I'm going to turn the bearing. You can see I'm holding the center race with my thumb and index finger on my right hand and turning the outer race with my left hand because I want to spread that grease around. I just keep doing the same thing over and over because I want to make sure the grease penetrates into the bearing surfaces of the balls themselves and gets spread around thoroughly. You can do this really as long as you want. I'm going to push some of that out until you're satisfied that you have the bearing thoroughly greased. You can see a little air pocket right there. Those will pop up from time to time. That's why you got to turn the bearings. Make sure you work the air out and work the grease in. And another one right there. And I'll just keep doing this for a few minutes until I'm comfortable and confident that I've got the bearing thoroughly greased and the grease is distributed. It's possible I might put a little more grease on the palm of my left hand here and work it in again. We'll see. And when I'm done with this one, I'll just repeat the process on the opposite bearing and then set them aside for until I need them. I turn the bearings, by the way, both ways. You can see there. See what I mean also when I say it gets really, really messy really fast. I just don't want to get this grease all over my hands and then have to spend 3 or 4 minutes getting them cleaned off before I go ahead and move to the next step. So that's fundamentally the process of greasing the wheel bearings. And I'll keep doing this for a few more minutes off camera, but I think you get the gist of it. And I'll bring you back when I got both bearings greased and we're ready to install them in the wheel hub. Notice that my hands are clean, the parts are clean, my tools, this is a socket that will be used to drive the bearing in. Everything's been clean. You've heard me harp about this before. I'm anal retentive about cleanliness, especially when you're dealing with precision parts such as bearings and seals and moving components. So take your time and get everything nice and clean. Alright, I've got this boss, or this hub, heated about as much as I dare. So now it's just a matter of taking the bearing and fitting it in. I think I'll use the spindle as a form of driver. And there we are, the first hub bearing reinstalled. This is the bearing that came from the side. I checked my photos that I took. So I installed the blue shielded bearing on the same side it came out of. So now we got that hub bearing installed. Flip around to the other side. You can see the bearing way down in there, a little bit of grease. First thing we have to do is take this spindle and fit it down in there. You can see the spindle came through. Now what I need to do, or I'm going to do, is heat this bearing race right here, or hub, so that I can drop this bearing in over the top of that spindle. I've got the hub where the bearing fits thoroughly heated. So now I'm going to drop this bearing in and just get it started. Roy, I know I should have a bearing driver. You've mentioned that to me before. I happened to think of you when I was doing this on the other side and thought, Roy probably wouldn't approve of me not having a bearing driver, but I haven't gotten around to picking one up yet, so we have to do it old school. This socket is slightly smaller than the outside diameter of the brace itself. Here we go. Make sure both bearings turn. They do. Both a little greasy right now, but that's okay. All right. So there we've got both bearings seated. And they turn freely. I can tell in my fingers. Obviously, you can't experience this, but the bearings are doing what they're supposed to do. So I've got that part of it done. Our next step will be to do the assembly of the brake backing plate. So we'll put in the speedometer drive. That's what some of these components are for, and we'll attach the brake shoes. Speaking of assembling of the brake backing plate, there are a couple of seals, 3 of them in fact, that will be used. This large one, this is a NOS that I got off of eBay because this part is no longer supported by Yamaha. That fits down in here. This seal, the small seal, actually, this is the original, actually fits down inside of the drive mechanism right there for the speedometer drive. And it didn't come out very easy. I try to preserve things as much as possible, but you can see that it didn't give up its position easily. That's the original seal. So I'd like to talk about seals a little bit in NOS and currently available parts from all the major suppliers or OEMs, that being Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Suzuki. Especially my experience has been Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Suzuki. Not quite as much Honda, but there might be some applicability there as well, because I work on all 4 of those brands, mostly Suzuki and Kawasaki, to a lesser degree Honda, and even lesser than that Yamaha. Nonetheless, seals. This is the original seal I pulled out. This part number is the part number that Yamaha had listed as a replacement for this seal, and that's what they sent me. Now you can see obviously those are not the same size. And I even triple checked this part number in the fish, the microfiche from Yamaha. Clearly there's an error in the Yamaha parts list. This is not uncommon, folks. In fact, it's pretty typical. So what I ended up doing is I'm not going to just order another one of these, because there's a very high probability I'm going to get another one of those, which is not what I need. So I went out and looked up the part number for this setup here. Actually, this goes like this. And this gear drive mechanism was used on a lot of other bikes of the same era as the YL1. And I ultimately found a different part number for that seal than this one that is no longer supported by Yamaha, as it would turn out. However, I did find the seal on eBay. There's quite a few of them, in fact. Some of the vendors were kind enough to place a rule next to their seal that would indicate the size, and I believe I found the right part number by looking up this part from an era equivalent bike that was used on both the YL1 and these other bikes, found the different seal number, went to eBay and ordered one. So I do not have the new seal for this yet. I expect to have it in the next 3 or 4 working days or so. And it'll be interesting to see if that is in fact the right seal. So I suspect the fish here is just simply wrong on that part number. On this seal, this, if you'll notice, has got a cone shape to it. And this seal fits in here. This is the original, by the way. Fits like this. And again, I was careful to try to preserve it when I pulled it out. This part number is still supported by Yamaha, so I ordered one. And here's what I got. See the shape difference? This one has a cone shape to it, taper to it. This one doesn't. I believe this seal will in fact work. In fact, I know it will. This new one, very confident of that. And it's an equivalent replacement part that is still used very likely on other bikes in Yamaha's current lineup. So though it's functionally equivalent, it doesn't look quite the same. Now I could use this seal and 99% of the population would never know the difference. However, that doesn't work for me. I went out on eBay and in fact found some NOS seals that are shaped like this. They're quite pricey, anywhere from 10 to 20 bucks. I think what I'm going to do, rather than use this one because it just doesn't look right for me, or to order a new $10 or more seal off of eBay. Since this one's in very good shape, I was real careful to preserve it. There's a little bit of a nick. I don't know if you can see it right there. That's where the axle goes through. I think it'll be perfectly fine for my application. Since this is a restoration and won't really be ridden to speak of, I'll clean it up a little bit. This is the edge that seals inside of the hub like that. I think I'm just going to go ahead and use it to preserve the original look. Now, if I was going to ride this bike, seriously ride it, I would very likely just go out on eBay, order an NOS part of this shape and part number that would mimic this part exactly, and use a new one here. But for my purposes, since it is really a show bike and I can clean this up and make it look really good, it'll function okay for my application and my use. So the reason I took you all through this is that even though the parts are still listed as available, doesn't mean they're the same aesthetically. They might be functionally, such as you have here. And even if you order the part number that they list as the correct number for the application, like here, it's not. And I run into both of these problems all the time. That is, it's functionally equivalent, but it isn't the same as the original aesthetically. That's a pretty common problem. And a wrong microfiche or the part number listings being incorrect is very common also. It's nothing to get frustrated with. You have to just be prepared to deal with it because it's very common. And to reiterate, that's one of the reasons why I take care to try to preserve everything that I can when I pull something apart. Bearings, like you saw here, these are the original bearings that came out of these wheels. And even though they're available from Yamaha, and they probably would look the same in this case, they're very expensive. I think they're around $25 per, something like $22, 25 US dollars per, versus the originals were very functional. They were smooth. I cleaned them up. They went right back in. So I thought I would share this little sideline diatribe with you regarding bearings and NOS and currently available parts, because you never know what you're going to bump into.